Good afternoon. Welcome to the Center for Disaster Philanthropy webinar, Using Indigenous Knowledge to Prevent and Respond to Disasters. Excuse me, my name is Heidi Schultz, and I am the Program Manager for the Midwest Early Recovery Fund's Native American and Tribal Communities Recovery Program at the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Some reminders before we get started. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we will answer them at the end of the panel presentation. If you're on Twitter, please use hashtag CDP4Recovery. That's CDP, the number 4, recovery, to share and join the discussion. And don't forget to follow us at Funds for Disaster. At the end of the webinar, there will be a short survey. Please complete this to help us to improve our webinar offerings to better meet your needs. And finally, we are recording this webinar. It will be available on our website and YouTube channel shortly after the webinar is complete. Live captioning is now available via Zoom. Click on Closed Caption Live Transcript to access it, and more accurate captions will be in the recording. This webinar is co-sponsored by Change Philanthropy, Council on Foundations, Giving Compass, Hispanics in Philanthropy, Peak Grantmakers, the Funders Network, and United Philanthropy Forum. We thank them all for their support. As we begin this webinar, CDP acknowledges that we are working from the stolen lands of the many original peoples. We recognize that Indigenous peoples have been displaced and disenfranchised from their land by the socioeconomic and cultural disaster of colonialism as well as disasters. We acknowledge when the U.S. was founded that there were exclusions and erasures of Indigenous knowledge about how to appropriately care for these lands, causing environmental destruction and degradation, which has had a significant impact on disaster risk and on communities. We are committed to dismantling the ongoing legacies, systems, and structures of settler colonialism and white supremacy. We commit ourselves to understand where and how wealth accumulation has harmed people and Mother Earth herself, and the complexities of philanthropy as connected to that truth. Despite current centuries of theft, violence, and murder, there still and always will be Indigenous land. Please join us and acknowledge the original peoples and their elders, past and present, as well as the future generations. Now, just a reminder of the goals of this webinar. We hope to have an increased understanding of traditional Indigenous knowledge related to the environment, to develop an enhanced understanding of how to support Indigenous communities, and to think about climate change and disasters from a more holistic perspective. So what is Indigenous knowledge? The important role of Indigenous knowledge in disasters and climate resiliency is something that CDP believes in strongly, as you will hear from one of our speakers. It is an area that we have funded, yet I admit that it is an area that I don't know a lot about. So thankfully, I am, I'm humbled to be with and to learn from our speakers today alongside all of you. And thankfully, CDP also has a learning and partnership team who are able to pull together some key information that I want to share as some initial framing of the issues. I think this can help all of us get on the same page as we proceed. So here's a definition. Indigenous knowledge is the unique local knowledge that has been passed down through generations and developed through history, experience, experiments, and understanding of the environment. Further, Indigenous knowledge is a body of knowledge built up by a group of people through generations of living in close contact with nature. Generally speaking, such knowledge evolves in the local environment so that it is specifically adapted to the requirements of local people and conditions. It is also creative and experimental, constantly incorporating outside influences and inside innovations to meet new conditions. We are using this term very specifically to refer to First People or original inhabitants. Some people prefer to use local knowledge to represent the information and awareness of a community as differentiated from technical or scientific knowledge. Hoda Yacob outlines a number of key characteristics of Indigenous knowledge in her work. I'm not going to read all of these, but a few that I want to highlight. It is practical, common sense, based on teachings and experience passed on from generation to generation. It is holistic. It cannot be compartmentalized, and it is rooted in the spiritual health, culture, and language of the people. It is based on experience acquired from observations over time. It is argued that it may be most useful for local scale decision-making. It can show an understanding of the complex relationships between these individual components and the dynamic ecosystems within which they act. And it is frequently linked with the sustainable use of local resources. So let's talk numbers. Globally, there are about 370 million Indigenous peoples. They make up only 4.425% of the world's population, but they inhabit 22 to 25% of the Earth's surface. They support about 80% of global biodiversity. The World Bank says some of the most biologically important lands and waters are intact as a result of Indigenous peoples' stewardship. Their knowledge and expertise on how to adapt, mitigate, and reduce risks from climate change and natural disasters are considered vital. Adequately responding to these challenges requires considering Indigenous peoples as fundamental stakeholders and important partners in the development process. Now it is my honor to introduce our special guests. I'm looking forward to the information they'll share with us today. Patricia Velásquez is an award-winning actress, supermodel, philanthropist, activist, and author. She is Wayuu in the northernmost part of Colombia and Northwest Venezuela. Patricia is the Organization of American States Goodwill Ambassador for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples of the Americas. She founded the Wayúu Foundation in 2002 to help improve the lives of Latin American Indigenous communities while maintaining and respecting their traditions, culture, and beliefs. Patricia was appointed UNESCO Artist for Peace in 2003, and she is a member of the Leadership Council of the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. Chele and I are pretty glad that this webinar is audio only, so we don't have to appear in a Zoom box next to her. Chele Ryder has worked for the American Red Cross for just shy of 17 years, including the past 9 years as a Division Disaster State Relations Director, currently supporting Louisiana, Oklahoma, Kansas, and FEMA Region 6 in the Southwest and Rocky Mountain Division. In addition, she has represented the Red Cross as a member of the Elite Emergency Management Institute Tribal Emergency Management Cadre of instructors for the past 8 years. She is also the Red Cross Tribal Relations Subject Matter Expert and lead supporting national and local tribal relations. Chele resides in Norman, Oklahoma, and is a very proud Native woman and citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for taking the time to share your time and expertise with us. Patricia, let's start with you. Please tell us a little about the work of the Wayúu Foundation.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for your introduction, and about your comment, not true. And I have to tell everybody that is listening to us, thank you so much for tuning in. And Chele and Heidi are two of the most beautiful women you would ever meet. And that means inside and out. So thank you so much. Yes, I am Wayuu from the indigenous community called Wayuu, and is located in the Guajira region, right on the border between Venezuela and Colombia. It's about 500,000 people, and the Wayuu is a matriarchal community. So my mom is Wayuu, therefore I'm 100% Wayuu. It is really wonderful to be able to talk about, especially I'd like to ask you a question. Do you know how indigenous communities have regarded the land through centuries? Well, you take only what you need and you feed it back, because nature needs to be in perfect balance. And with that, we go to the slide 1. So while so many civilizations have fought against each other throughout history, and many of them have disappeared, indigenous communities have remained. And why is that? Is because of this same belief of balance. we can go to the next slide. Do you know that nature on indigenous peoples' lands is degrading less quickly than in other areas? Indigenous communities are some of the best environmental stewards. We also play an important role in long-term monitoring of ecosystems. And this is critical because some of these groups live in very remote areas. And it's really these communities that are collecting the data, often just through everyday experiences. Indigenous peoples will play a critical part of protecting the planet's biodiversity and the overall health of our ecosystems. The current pandemic reflects our connectedness to one another and how actions and events in one part of the world affect us all. But what more can we do? Let's not forget that this has a ripple effect that ripples down to us. And even if it doesn't seem like something that is so close to you because it's so far away in an indigenous village somewhere in the world, eventually it will catch up to us. Therefore, we must act so our children can continue to breathe, just like you and I have done until now. Every small action you can individually take connects us and creates that ripple effect for all of us. Next slide. One of the things we have found an extraordinary experience for our community, the Wayuu community, through the foundation, the Wayuu Foundation, which we started in 2002, because it's a matriarchal community, we learned that for generations, Wayuu women have learned to create these beautiful susu bags that take about 21 days to make a bag, and they're all one of a kind. So the foundation started the sales of these bags, which then go back into the community. And we created a social space where counseling and orientation and family planning, nutrition, hygiene, and many other workshops are given. This program was very successful. We saw it became very popular. I'm sure many of you have seen these bags all over the world. And we were just the foundation that really started it, but now many other communities from Colombia and the Venezuelan side are selling these bags in outlets all over the world, like Bloomingdale's, Barney, Saks, Pret-a-Porter. I mean, we really couldn't keep up. But the idea was, okay, this is something that indigenous women have done for generations. Let's bring them to a place where they are going to be working, and then they can receive all these different workshops. And the condition was you stay, once you have gone through all these workshops, then you will get paid according to international standards. And we really did see a change of behavior. And by behavior, I mean the recovery of the hope. There was a sense of ownership, of pride, and of hope in the community that they have lost many, many, many years ago. And that if we can go to the next slide, then we ask ourselves our questions, how can funders really trust indigenous communities? Well, we are the best stewardess for the well-being of the most unprivileged communities. Because indigenous communities in themselves have a sense of sharing, a permanency, and especially they're used to work on emergency situations. We have learned at the Wayuu Taya that if we give them the tools, indigenous communities, they want to be accountable. All they want is to be included, and we are your biggest allies. Just to give you an example with Wayuu Taya, we received 2 grants from CDP. And the first grant was the COVID-19 emergency response. We were able to help thousands of the most vulnerable people affected by the pandemic through the purchase and distribution of all the different items that you can see on the screen right now. And this benefit just from this grant mass for almost 7,750 children. And it was so wonderful to see how the community organized themselves with the help of the team. And the area where we were located was in the side of Venezuela. The area was the most hit. So I cannot tell you how many lives we help save through this grant that we obtained through CDP. And then if we can go to the next slide, we obtained this wonderful grant that, because, and this is very important for me to say as a president of the Wayúu Foundation, because of the trust that we received from CDP, we were able to start the Recovery and Rebuild program, where just through this grant, we were able to obtain, over right now is much more, but during the period of the grant is, over 1,400,000 meals benefiting over almost 47,000 people. But what was key is because we saw the community and we have the trust of the community, we were able to purchase a well that initiated the Water and Sustainable Farming Program. And with this grant that we obtained from CDP, Wayuu Taya is well on its way to become sustainable. And if we can go to our last, just in 2021, because of the trust that we have received from the Indigenous community, the Wayuu community, and the trust that we have received from partners, especially like CDP, Wayuu Taya has been able to benefit over 140,000 people. That's just during 2021, through the water program, through the farming program, through the nutrition program, and especially through our food program. So we want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. And I'm sure when we answer the questions, we can go even a little deeper. But this just shows how when you have trust from the Indigenous communities and trust from the donors itself, the results are limitless. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, we look forward to hearing from you again when we hit the Q&As. Next, let's move on to Chele. I'd love to hear what kinds of issues that you've seen and that you've been addressing in your work and some of your experiences.
Sure. I think if we can start with slide 1, I'm going to hit all of those high points, but want to say, of course, thank you to my co-presenter for that beautiful summary. She shared mostly about international work, but a lot of what she shared beautifully also applies to domestic, so United States domestic issues, and that's what we're going to talk about with this. Is moving on to that domestic side. And also thank you for the invitation. So I know that you've had probably a number of climate change and climate adaptation seminars and webinars coming to this point. So I won't go through all of these, but I believe that you do receive this slide deck at the end. So I left as many in as I possibly could. Right now, it probably looks like death by PowerPoint, but I promise it's not. So I just want to hit a couple of high notes on this slide. Over the last 3 years, we hear a lot of conversation about how climate change and how weather patterns and disasters are becoming more and more damaging, but we can find some data about it, but this is the data that we use to drive a lot of our work through Red Cross. So over the last 3 years, we've seen a 6-fold increase in the annual number of billion-dollar disasters compared to 40 years ago. More than 40% of Americans, if you think about this on a broad scale across the United States, some 130 million people live in a county, a parish, or a tribal land that has been struck by some form of climate disaster in 2021, so just in last year alone. And then this one, I think, is the one that affects us or impacts us the most. In 2021, we averaged a new major disaster for us. We measure that sometimes in money and in impact, but a major disaster is every week and a half. If you think about that, so every 10 days, we had a new large-scale disaster that impacted humans in some way. Next slide. So I want to point out this first bullet point on this one. So climate change, and you know, we just heard a little bit about COVID and some of that impact. These disasters, both are disasters, affect the most vulnerable. So low-income families, older adults, communities of color, and people with disabilities in a way that people who are resourced are not impacted. And so when these families are forced from their homes or forced from their land, they tend to remain displaced for longer periods of time, and already living on that the brink of poverty that can send them into a free fall. What we have narrowed this down to, I think, as a whole of a voluntary agency or a voluntary organization active in disaster community, is kind of 3 categories of health, housing, and hunger. And those tend to be the ones that are impacted the most dramatically by disaster. And what we're what we have chosen to focus on. And that graphic is actually the 2020 hurricane season track. And I just use that as an example. It's kind of hard to see on here, but in that year alone, Louisiana is one of my states. And we had, in addition to Hurricane Laura, we had 8 other tropical systems make landfall that year. And that's just an example on how quickly and how dramatically the climate change is affecting what we do. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about Indigenous time and land management. It's a very symbiotic relationship that we have with time. It's a give, it's a receive, and then it's a gratitude, and then a repeating of that cycle of giving, receiving, and giving thanks. We don't talk about things necessarily about today or tomorrow, but we look at 100 years or 7 generations. That changes a little bit depending on the tribe, but you'll hear a lot of 7 generations being referred to, and that is what it is. It is very cyclical. It is not linear. Past, present, and future are all connected, and we work, of course, always with the wisdom and guidance from the elders and the ancestors, and look at how those future generations, that 7 generations, might be impacted, right? So we're talking about our great-grandchildren, our great 7 times great-grandchildren, kind of reaping what we sow today, good or not good. So the decisions we make are very much connected. The graphic you see is a medicine wheel, and I put that because it's really indicative of how we view land management and time, right? So it's the cardinal directions. It's also the stages of life. It is the seasons that Mother Nature brings to us, sometimes used for ceremony and healing, but also in land management, everything is cyclical. We do not overhunt. We did not overhunt. We did not overfarm. We shared when we had extra, and we shared and received when we needed extra. We gave back to the land, and thanks for what the land and what the animals were willing to do for us to help us move forward. So it's a very time and land management, and really the tribal way, the indigenous way, is that very symbiotic relationship. And I'm so glad that I saw that on one slide earlier. I thought I was the only one who used that. So I'm glad that we are independently making that same connection. And symbiotic is really the heart of everything that is tribal. That's what it means to me. So I want to talk just a little bit about some of the land management. So agrarian tribes at contact. So the Mashpee, and I believe my friend Nelson Andrews from the Mashpee is on this call somewhere, at contact with the first colonists. What the colonists found were not tribes that were nomadic. They were not. They were more stationary and more agrarian. There was farming. There were some livestock, not a lot, but there was also a really rich tradition of not necessarily deforesting, but forest thinning, and taking care of the land that was taking care of the people, taking care of the water, taking care of the timber, taking care of the entirety of the environment. And I believe Patricia spoke about that as well, that being stewards of the land and of the earth. That is an incredibly rich tradition that goes back thousands of years and continues to up until today. There was a disruption in that with the removal, sometimes called the Trail of Tears. That Trail of Tears actually more specifically applies to the Cherokee leaving North Carolina and coming to, or a portion of the Cherokee coming to what would become Oklahoma, but was Indian territory at the time. So we just generally refer to it as the removal. So if you have this land and this land is part of you and you have given everything to the land, being removed from that space to a new space is heartbreaking for the entirety of the tribe, right? Not just the people, but the land suffers as well. And so moving to a new space and trying to learn new farming techniques and finding new water sources and trying to maintain the foods that you are used to and the hunting that you were used to was very much disrupted for a while. And I think some of that has been regained, but we're going to talk a little bit more about some food sustainability programs that are out there, and then how you can help support holistically funding and what's needed. Next slide, please. So the Iroquois Confederacy has done an amazing thing. We were there 2 weeks ago, a group of us, to see what they have done. And it's not the entirety, I'm sorry, of the Iroquois Confederacy. It is specifically the Onondaga. And that picture is one of just a few we were allowed to take in their storehouse. They have a lot of traditional medicines and a lot of sacred items that are also in there. So this is just one shot. And what they've been able to do, they don't accept funding. They don't accept any funding from any government entity, the Onondaga specifically, or the Iroquois Confederacy. And what they've done is grown and stored 4 years worth of food, including a herd of buffalo, chickens, hogs, maple syrup, beans and corn. I learned so much about corn while I was there. There's something like 4,000 different brands or breeds of corn out there, and the different colors represent different nutrients and different medicines that would be utilized. So while we're talking about that, food access definitely plays a role, right? Food sovereignty plays a role in reducing poverty, and specifically in the time and completeness of the recovery post-disaster. So that 4 years worth of food is for every member of the tribe. In another year, they will have seven years worth grown and stored. So we went to learn what that looks like. So hopefully we can begin to help duplicate that in other areas. Foods are different. So when you think about funding for a tribal community, food banks are definitely part of that network, that holistic network. But there are also other programs like this one that the Onondaga have worked so hard to bring to fruition. Looking at the foods that the people would be looking for, right? So corn, beans, masa flour in some portions of the country. So when you're thinking about how to help with food insecurity, specifically under that health, housing, and hunger narrative or categories, you have to think differently about what is going to be needed and what will be accepted. After the removal, tribes were given what we call today, we still call them commods, right? That's the government cheese, that's the flour, the lard, things like that were not traditional to our diet. And food for us is very much medicine. So good food is good medicine and helps our bodies and our spirits function the way that they should. And so staying away is moving more toward the beans, the corn, the things like that. That's really what we're looking for. And when you're thinking about funding and you're thinking about what food sovereignty looks like, not just the access to food, but that cultural preservation and the passing on of traditions and knowledge and how to grow, harvest, and preserve and serve those ancestral foods that feed not just the body, but the spirit, and help maintain that continued viability of the people, the culture, and the place in that order. Next slide, please. So these are just a couple of highlights about what it's like to be inside of a tribe and be looking for funding, and for you as funders, what it looks like from the outside. So there's always this misperception or this myth that Native communities, because of federal government or state government or casinos, can cover all of those expenses for tribes and that you get free college education. I'm here to tell you that none of that is true. Casinos have very specific ways that money comes in and money goes out. And it is not necessarily for the good of the whole. It has to do with gaming compacts, federal and state. Government monies coming in come with strings as they go back out. That's why things like CDP and these other voluntary agencies like Wayúu are so important, because it helps promote that sovereignty and that, that no strings attached type programming. Less than 1% of all charitable contributions nationally go to support Native American causes. I think that's a very dramatic statistic, and we did this, that 1% has not changed much over the last couple of years. I remember talking about it probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it was still at that 1%. Many tribes are located not only in food deserts, but housing, healthcare, education, and employment deserts. The reservation portion of the federal pathway for Indigenous peoples did not leave Indigenous peoples necessarily in their original homelands or in land that was going to be farmable or be able to support and maintain life. So good water, good timber, good hunting, good, you name it. And so they do tend to be a lot in food deserts and housing deserts, and of course, healthcare and education. Many Native Americans living on reservations do not own the land they live on, and nor does the tribe. That can be ancestral lands, that can be matriarchal lands, or lands that have been passed down as relatives have walked on. And the tribe, so I won't go too far into this, but a lot of it is what's called federal trust land, which means it's technically owned by the federal government in trust for the tribe. And so without that ability to own individual land, funding to start businesses or invest in local assets really don't exist in the traditional way that we think about it. Little or no access to credit or funding, and many nations, many tribes also do not have banks nearby. And so traditional ways of receiving and managing funds don't necessarily exist the way that we think they would. And then, so I think it's also really important to note that Native Americans, we have the solutions, right, to food insecurity, looking at the Onondaga, and then to unemployment by creating food sustainability programs and leadership programs and boys and girls clubs. We're going to talk about that a little bit on the next slide, but all of that, the food insecurity, the unemployment, the housing, it all, the solutions are all there. They're internal to the tribe. It's just a matter of resources and funding and knowing who to ask, or having the very specific holistic group of stakeholder agencies like CDP, Red Cross, all of us as a collective, coming to the group and asking what is needed and asking how we can symbiotically partner to meet those needs. And then climate change. I'm just going to mention this. This is kind of a separate thing, but the climate change portion of this, we do have tribes who are losing their land due to climate change. The Ile de Jean-Charles in Louisiana and the Bayou. Their island that they have lived on for thousands of years is sinking as wetlands are lost, and they will soon move inland. And so if you think about what that would do to generations of people who have lived on the water and made their living and their life on their land and on the water of the bayou, and being moved inland, and what that change might look like with that health, housing, hunger, and all of the other things that we've spoken about. And then there are others. There's one tribe in Alaska, and not one. There are lots, 200 plus tribes in Alaska, but one particular tribe, the glacier that they have lived on, and that has been their lifestyle for, again, thousands of years. The glacier has melted, and therefore their land or their piece of that glacier and their designated space in the universe and space in the state of Alaska is now, it no longer exists. And so we're starting to see this. We've been seeing it for 4 or 5 years. I'm sure there are a number of other examples out there. But as we move through this, just keep in mind that those are not even probably the most extreme examples. Those are just the two that I have right in front of me for this week to read about. And then that's just a note to say that is the great Chief Pushmataha of the Choctaw Nation of Mississippi. There is no particular reason except for that he has an incredible story about going to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of the tribes. And I am actually his 8 times great granddaughter. And so I always mention that because I'm incredibly proud of that. Next slide. So what can you do? What can we all do collectively? A lot of this, again, is going to look probably a little bit like what Patricia said on the international side. This is, again, domestic. So promoting that tribal sovereignty, working as a holistic group of stakeholders in the voluntary agencies and in other agencies, sticking close to that non-governmental aspect as much as possible. Asking and building that symbiotic partnership and looking at the tribe as a sovereign nation, as we are, and going forward and making that meeting with the respect that's due is incredibly important. And so again, just meeting and asking and sticking within the bounds of sovereignty. Invest in initiatives that have positive impact in the communities, right? And the grassroots leaders and youth as well. So there are Native leadership programs, there are youth programs like Boys and Girls Clubs, all kinds of things. If you look, you can find, but also going back to that tribal sovereignty, first bullet point, it's really important to make sure that we as VOADs, we as funders, we as programmatic experts are not going in and telling people what they need, but going and asking, how can we partner? Not what do you need and what can we provide to save you, but how can we partner together for resilience and in the community? And then also understanding that disaster preparedness and response, they're just one spoke in the wheel, right? Health, housing, hunger, education. We've talked about all of this moving through this, and that it really does take all of us and for as many avenues of support as you can possibly imagine, there's a need somewhere in a community that we can meet collectively. And it does take immediate funding, or it does take funding to be able to manage those needs and those partnerships. It's not really about need. And I will finish by saying that it is so important that symbiotic partnership, I cannot state it enough. It is not about a VOAD going in or a funder going in and saying, tell me what you need so I can just give you a check. It always has to be a partnership. There is that, going back to the land management and the time management, there is give, receive, gratitude, repeat the cycle. And so if you're looking at doing some of the partnering, I'm sure anyone at CDP, any one of us on this call today can help explain that further, but I can't state how important that is. Thank you so much for having me today. I think that we are probably ready for questions.
We are. Thank you, Chele. That was awesome. And of course, when I'm hearing all this, it just brings up more questions. So, I wish we had more time, but for now, we have received several questions in advance, and there's a few flying on the Q&A right now. So I'll be working through both lists, and feel free to keep entering your questions in the Q&A box. As a reminder, the CDP webinars are aimed at providing education for the philanthropic community. So while all are welcome to pose a question, we'll be kind of first and foremost focusing on those addressing funder issues. But this one's a good one, sorry. This is a good one, and it's for funders too, it's for all of us. So there's a question on the Q&A, and this is to Patricia. What is the role of women in land management, and how has having a matriarchal society informed Wayúu's approach to land management?
Oh, thank you so much. It's a wonderful question. The Wayuu community, as we said before, it's about 500,000 people that are divided between Venezuela and Colombia. So they move freely between both countries. Because it's a matriarchal community, Wayuu women not only are the ones that make the decisions on a daily basis on the day-to-day of the family, but also the land. As of right now, for example, as a part of our farming program, we are bringing farming grapes because they want to come back to do farming. Keep in mind, in terms of the Wayuu community, it is one of the only matriarchal communities we have within the indigenous communities internationally. There are very few, but I take this opportunity, I take this question as an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit internationally about other indigenous communities and how they manage the land. Let's talk about the Amazon, for example. There are 17, just on the Venezuelan side, there are 17 indigenous communities there, like the Piaroas, the Yanomami, Panare, Pemo. But the Yanomami, for example, which I'm sure many of you have heard about this community, they are very remote. They're one of the only 5 most remote indigenous communities in the world, and they are stewardess of their land. They farm what they need, and by that I mean just what they need within their small communities. And there in this community is more the men that goes out and hunt. The women do their little farming because they're indigenous communities. Like, for example, another community called Piaroa they work very similar, but they have a much more male driven decision making. So, but there are other communities, for example, when you go up in the north, closer to Guyana, then you have the Wayúu community. And I wanted to mention this community because this is a community that just to go see them, you only have a few hours to work with them or to be with them, because then the river goes up, and if you don't get the little boat back, then you cannot come back. And this population itself is struggling tremendously. Is the population, indigenous population, actually is the population in the world that has the most HIV nowadays. So I guess where I wanted to go with this, and please forgive me if I kind of stayed away, divert from the original question, is that communities, indigenous communities around the world, even though we're all cousins, because we are cousins, we are so different from one another. And just as Chele was saying it, we need to, in order to work and in order to penetrate these communities and create a sustainable difference, there needs to be a lot of respect for the leaders. And when we talk about how do we make sure that we can be prepared for disasters, but also not only the disasters, but sustainability, I would say is by building the leadership and identifying communities that do have already leaders that are working with very trustworthy organizations like Center for Disaster Philanthropy or like Red Cross.
Thank you, Patricia. There's another one that just came in, and I think it's, oh, and Chele wants to answer it too. Yay. That I was going to start off and then hand it over to Chele. So the question is super important. Tribal councils are important spaces to respect and understand well. Any ideas for engaging I can't say that word, successfully through a council to offer resources or services? And I'll start out and then I want to hand it over to Chele. So what we do at CDP through the work that I do is we would always like to meet with the tribal council or representatives from the council, but we follow the lead of the disaster impacted community and those local leaders. For instance, I've worked with grantee partners that were like, oh yeah, let's go see the tribal council. And they actually had me, which is, a huge honor and a very humbling experience, go and meet the whole tribal council and visit with them about the disaster and CDP and how we can partner. And again, I'm going to say that partner, right? It can't be transactional. It needs to, be part of building a relationship. It runs the gamut. We've had ones where the local representative, the community, the local representatives is very tied to the council, and that individual will go to the council and tell them about what their plans are to recover in that community and that they want to partner with CDP and what that would look like. The opposite to where we have some communities that don't really want the council involved for various reasons, and we respect those people, right? This is your community. You know your local and your tribal politics and leadership and how things work. And we're going to do what you say and follow your lead. And I'd like Chele to speak to that a little bit further as well.
Sure. So I do want to refer back to something that Patricia was just saying about the matriarchal management inside tribes. That's the international perspective. The domestic perspective is that it is the same here for the majority of tribes, and that tended to be disrupted by removal and allotment. And I'm going to leave that there because that's really more of a history thing. That's just noting the differences, international to domestic. And to add to what Heidi was saying, I think, and Eric, I think the council seems to be where everyone would normally aim, but what I have found since you left this program in my hands 8 years ago is that really, much like what Heidi stated, the community, like that grassroots leader, or for us, it's a lot of times the emergency manager or whoever functions as the emergency manager inside the tribe, which looks a lot of different ways, just like it does in non-tribal communities. That's really our entree, and they understand their internal tribal politics better than we do, and what they take to the council is it's really important for them to be the ones to do it. So as an internal citizen of that tribe, that doesn't mean we can't go to council, but that would be by invitation and very much by exception over at least over the last numbers of years. The other thing that I would note about that, Heidi, is that the timeline, so where we sometimes in non-tribal world expect things to move very quickly and have that answer pretty much immediately. Everything has very much a different timeline because it does have to go from us to that grassroots leader, and then it has to go to council, and then council has to think about it, and then they come back, 2 weeks later with questions. And so the timeline that we would be expecting for programmatic support or implementation is not the same timeline that works inside tribal communities, and really any community that sees itself as culturally separate from the communities or the cultures that surround them. That timeline is just very different. It goes through, just like the medicine wheel example, it has to go through a number of people and a number of lenses before it can come back. And that would be the end of that answer, unless there is more you would like, Heidi.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, we could talk about that specific topic for hours as well.
Hours.
Hours, right? Lots of examples. Oh yeah.
Sure.
This I'd like to ask Patricia, is there a global, that you are aware of, is there a global Indigenous-led initiative to consider for funders to consider supporting when looking at global crisis response? And I'm going to add recovery. Is there an organization that you can think of that would be top of mind.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. There are many organizations and many initiatives for Indigenous initiatives, as you said. My experience is in relationship to helping our Indigenous communities, not only for disaster, but also just in general for our donors. I believe that we have to start as a donor, and I will ask you just to maybe ask in your heart, what is it that it's called for you? Because there are many initiatives that are in different areas. So if maybe yours is, I just really want to be able to help on, one of the most important things is when we communicate with Indigenous communities, we need to respect the traditions, the cultures, the beliefs, the languages. So maybe I just want to really focus, let's say, on languages, or in education. Because as the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples enshrines the right of Indigenous peoples to education, then you can go to places like the UNESCO, for example, in literacy. So as I said, I will just go from what do you feel as a donor, which areas you would like to focus on. I, as an Indigenous person, will tell you that our issues in our communities, at least in all the Americas, and we talk about this a lot in the Organization of the American States, which is also a great institution to look at when we talk about the situation of Indigenous communities. We are dealing with very, very, very basic needs. Just like no water, very little food, lack of education, communities that are being moved, like in the Amazon, for example, the communities that have to be moved from one area to the other due to the mining. So there are very specific problems to but the things we're dealing with are very, very basic. So my advice from someone who's on the ground, it will be just one of the things Indigenous communities, we have to develop trust. When when organizations want to come and help us, I would say just go to these organizations like CDP, like the Red Cross, that already have the trust from us as communities. Because that is not an easy, that's probably the hardest thing to do, is to build that trust. CDP has the trust, the Red Cross has that trust. So when they come to our communities, we believe them, because we've been pushed around so many times for so many years that I will say, as a donor, go to these organizations because they know how to do the work. They know how to partner with us as organizations. And I would also probably say us as organizations that are working on the ground, that are, okay, we're dealing with very basic things. How do we take it one step further? We have to make it sustainable. And how do we make it sustainable? Through education and by building leadership and capacity building, but maintaining the tradition, cultures, and beliefs.
Oh, wow. I should just wrap up with this, but one more quick question. And none of these are quick questions or quick answers, but this is a really good one that came in. For this one will be for Chele, and then we will have to wrap up. What examples would you share where Indigenous collaboration and guidance have been centered on in large-scale planning, development, and or disaster prevention and response work? I'm excited to hear what example you have too.
Yeah, I can start with one that I think it actually happened locally. I'm in Oklahoma, and I think it was really an incredible thing because it was the first of its kind. So we have an Air Force base here in just outside the Oklahoma City Metro, Tinker Air Force Base, and they were doing actually an aviation incident exercise And there are 3 or 4 tribes that were actually in the same jurisdiction as where the exercise was going to be: Citizen Potawatomi, Absentee Shawnee, a couple of others. But they, for the first time, I guess Tinker now has a tribal liaison, and that liaison reached out to the tribal emergency manager, who happens to be a friend and one of the longest sitting tribal emergency managers at like 21 years, I think, out there. And they were able to collaborate, not just with the cities and not just with the counties, but also with the tribal jurisdictions. We have a different land configuration in Oklahoma. We don't necessarily have specific reservation borders. Everything is what we call patchwork, so it's interwoven. So one side of an aviation incident could be on tribal land, and the other could be on land that is county, state, federal, something like that. So it was an incredible collaboration. I've seen a number of large scale, what we call SEER events or special events. So think like your Super Bowl or your an OU football game, which is a special event for me. But things like that, where tribes are really more part of that, locally and then nationally as well. We've had lots of, we yearly have what we call a national level exercise, which is an exercise of all functions based around a scenario. So it could be a hurricane in New Orleans, or it could be the Wasatch Fault that runs through the middle of Utah. It can be any one of those things. And over the last 5 years, I think I've seen much more tribal invitation to become part of those collaborative teams. And also, I think there's an idea that tribes are under-resourced when it comes to people and stuff and capacity to help respond, and they're very much not. The resources won't be showcased, and they won't be really where you can see them. But as Patricia indicated, even those relationships, you have to build the trust and you have to build the time. But we have so many shelters now inside Red Cross that are tribal buildings where we have just provided the training and the cots and blankets. And so all of those are large scale collaborations. And I think even the small ones, the little wins that we have in partnership every day, a small tornado response, a small flood response, those are all very big things to me.
Thank you, Chele. And we are running out of time for today, so that's all the time we have for questions. I wanted to just throw out a few thoughts from our conversation today and kind of wrap it up. I also want to mention there's a lot of questions we didn't get to or answer, a lot more interest on the work in the Iroquois Confederation with their food program. My understanding is there's another team of folks in the funding and recovery world, food world that are paying another visit out there. We will keep in touch with Feeding America and Chele, who's working on that project, and be sure to blog or post something on our website. So check back for more information about that. I think what we heard a lot is we need to invest the necessary time to build relationships. And is it quick and easy? No, but if you want to work with the community, you have to take the time and again, have that ambiotic relationship. It's not transactional. And it's not just about repairing the past wrongs. And it's also about building the new future relationships as well. And it's more than about money and funding projects, right? It's about building a just relationship. And science does not have all the answers. All I'm going to say is trust Indigenous knowledge. We've got it. Let's use it. So to wrap up, if you haven't seen it yet, we have a brand new website. The slide you're seeing now has some of the great resources that CDP is able to provide. Check out our weekly blog called What We're Watching. And be sure to check out our work at disasterphilanthropy.org. And the next webinar will be on June 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, called The Youngest Are Most at Risk, Early Childhood Development in Complex Crises. So thank you. And we'd like to thank our co-sponsors again, and to Patricia and Chele for taking the time to share both their time, their insights, and their experience with us. And please take a moment to complete the post-webinar survey. It's going to pop up automatically when you exit this webinar. Let us know what you'd like to see in future webinars. Already some suggestions in the Q&A. And if you have questions or thoughts that we were not able to address today, please email them to Tanya at tanya.gulliver-garcia. There's my timer, right on the dot, at disasterphilanthropy.org. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.